Mercedes just got hit by a rule that could erase their entire advantage overnight. The FIA didn't tweak something small. They cut downforce. The exact thing that made Mercedes untouchable in Miami. The same race where Antonelli recovered from chaos, executed a perfect strategy, and controlled the pace even with technical problems, without ever losing grip, without ever losing balance. Now imagine that car, with less stability, less control, less confidence. Because this isn't just about going slower. It's about turning the most dominant car on the grid into one that can finally be attacked. And if that happens, everything changes. At first, Miami didn't look like a car that needed less downforce. It looked like a car that had mastered it. Antonelli's race started in chaos. From pole position, into turn 1, he lost positions immediately, dropping into the middle of the field, surrounded by cars fighting for every inch of space. That's where most races fall apart. Dirty air hits the front wing. Downforce drops. Grip disappears. And suddenly, the car that was dominant in clean air becomes unpredictable. But that didn't happen. And that's the first warning sign. Because instead of struggling, the Mercedes stayed planted. Lap after lap. Corner after corner. Even in traffic, even under pressure, even while fighting through multiple overtakes, the car behaved like it was still in clean air. And that's not normal. Because downforce is supposed to be sensitive. It's supposed to punish you when you follow another car. It's supposed to make overtaking messy, unstable, risky. But in Miami, Mercedes didn't seem to suffer that penalty. Antonelli moved forward with control, not desperation. Every move looked calculated. Every corner looked stable. And then came the moment that changed everything. Lap 27. The undercut. Perfectly executed, yes, but supported by something deeper. Because that outlap required maximum grip, maximum confidence, maximum stability through every corner. One small mistake, and the opportunity disappears. But there was no mistake. The car delivered exactly what the strategy needed. And from that point on, the race was controlled. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Because later in the race, problems appear. Gearbox issues. Throttle response not behaving correctly. The kind of issues that normally destabilize the car, especially on corner exit, where traction and downforce work together. But again, nothing changes. The rear stays stable. The front stays precise. The balance holds. Norris pushes, but never gets that final opportunity. And that's the contradiction. Because a car under stress should start to lose aerodynamic consistency. It should move more, slide more, struggle more. But Mercedes didn't. And that's exactly why this downforce cut is so important. Because what we saw in Miami wasn't just a fast car. It was a car that held its aerodynamic platform better than anyone else. A car that didn't collapse under pressure. A car that kept generating grip even when conditions said it shouldn't. And now, that exact strength is being reduced. Which means everything we saw in Miami is about to be tested again. But without that same level of grip. Without that same level of stability. Without that same level of control. And that's where things can start to fall apart. And this is where the entire grid starts to feel the impact. Because a downforce cut doesn't just affect one team. It changes the way every car behaves, but not in the same way. Some cars rely more on mechanical grip. Others depend heavily on aerodynamic stability. And Mercedes has built its entire dominance on that stability. That's the difference. Because when you remove downforce, you don't just slow the car down. You make it harder to drive. Harder to predict. Harder to control when it really matters. Now think about what that means over a full race distance. Braking zones become less stable. The rear of the car starts to move more. Corner entry becomes less precise. And on exit, traction becomes unpredictable. That's where lap time disappears. Not in one big moment, but in small losses, lap after lap. And that's exactly where rivals come back into play. Because McLaren was already there. Norris stayed within reach in Miami, always close enough to apply pressure, but never close enough to attack. That gap was built on consistency. On the ability of the Mercedes to deliver the same performance every single lap. Now remove part of that consistency. And suddenly, that gap disappears. Ferrari benefits too. Their biggest issue wasn't just speed. It was maintaining performance over long runs. But now, with less downforce across the grid, everyone struggles with stability. Everyone deals with degradation. And that compresses the field. Red Bull, the same story. Not dominant, but close enough. And when the leading car loses even a fraction of its advantage, being close is enough. Because Formula One doesn't need massive changes to flip a race. It needs small ones. A slightly weaker rear end. A tiny loss of front grip. A moment where the car doesn't respond exactly as expected. That's all it takes. And that's why the tension inside Mercedes is real. Because they're not just adapting to a rule. They're adapting to a completely different balance. A car that no longer behaves the same way. A car that may no longer give the driver that absolute confidence. And confidence is everything. Because Antonelli's strength this season hasn't just been speed. It's been precision under pressure. The ability to push without making mistakes. The ability to control races even when things go wrong. But that depends on trust in the car. Take that away, even slightly, and everything becomes more difficult. More corrections. More small errors. More opportunities for rivals. And those opportunities are exactly what teams like McLaren are waiting for. Because they don't need Mercedes to collapse. They just need them to hesitate. Once. That's all it takes. And that's why the next race becomes so important. Because this isn't just about performance anymore. It's about adaptation. Who understands the new limits faster? Who rebuilds balance quicker? Who finds confidence again under a completely different set of conditions? And for the first time this season, Mercedes might not be the team with all the answers. And this is where everything leads to one final, uncomfortable truth. Because this isn't just about losing grip. It's about losing control of the race itself. Mercedes hasn't just been fast this season. They've been in charge. Controlling pace. Controlling strategy. Controlling when to push, when to defend, when to respond. Miami was the perfect example of that. Antonelli didn't just win, he dictated the race. Even after losing positions at the start, even while dealing with problems, he regained control and never gave it back. That's dominance. Now imagine removing the one thing that made that possible. Stability. Because once that disappears, even slightly, control disappears with it. And that's where races change. Because instead of leading comfortably, you start reacting. Instead of managing tires, you start fighting them. Instead of choosing your moments, you start defending every corner. And that's when mistakes appear. Not big ones. Small ones. A slightly late brake. A small snap of oversteer. A moment of hesitation on throttle. Tiny details. But in Formula One, those tiny details decide everything. And that's exactly what rivals are waiting for. Because McLaren doesn't need to be faster everywhere. They just need one opportunity. One lap where Mercedes loses that perfect balance. One corner where the rear steps out. One straight where traction isn't clean. And suddenly, they're alongside. Ferrari, same story. They've struggled with consistency, but now consistency across the grid is reduced. Which means their weakness becomes less visible. Red Bull? They've been close enough all season. Waiting. Watching. Ready for a moment like this. Because when the leading car loses its foundation, the entire field closes in. And that's when Formula One becomes unpredictable again. Something Mercedes has avoided all year. But now, they can't. And that's why this moment is so critical. Because it doesn't just test speed. It tests adaptability. It tests whether Mercedes can rebuild confidence in a car that no longer behaves the same way. It tests whether Antonelli can still control a race, without that perfect stability underneath him. And that leads to the final question. When the lights go out next time, will Mercedes still be the team dictating everything? Or are we about to see them fight for control, just like everyone else? Because if that happens, then Miami won't be remembered as the confirmation of dominance. It will be remembered as the last race where everything was still under control. And this is where the story finally reveals what was really at stake the entire time. Because this was never just about one race. And it was never just about one rule. It was about an advantage that was so precise, so controlled, that the FIA had to step in. Miami exposed it. Not in an obvious way. But in the way the car behaved when it shouldn't have. Stable in dirty air. Consistent under pressure. Unaffected by problems that normally change everything. That's not just performance. That's a system working at its absolute limit. And now, that limit has been reduced. Which means the real answer is finally here. Mercedes wasn't just faster. They were more stable than anyone else. More predictable. More controlled. And that's exactly what this downforce cut removes. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to bring them back. Back into the fight. Back into the chaos. Back into a position where races are no longer managed, but contested. And that changes everything. Because once you remove that layer of control, Formula One becomes what it always is underneath. Unforgiving. Every corner matters. Every mistake costs. Every rival becomes a threat. And now, for the first time this season, Mercedes has to deal with that reality. No more perfect balance. No more guaranteed stability. No more invisible advantage holding everything together. Just a car. A fast one, yes. but no longer untouchable. And that's the final shift. Because the question is no longer whether Mercedes was dominant. We already saw that. The real question is what happens when that dominance is taken away. And now, we're about to find out. Because when the next race begins, everything we saw before becomes irrelevant. New limits, new behavior, new pressure. And only one thing will matter. Who adapts first? Who finds control again? Who turns uncertainty into advantage? Because if Mercedes can do that, they stay on top. But if they can't, then this downforce cut won't just be a regulation change. It will be remembered as the exact moment the championship was opened. The moment where one team stopped controlling Formula One, and everyone else finally had a chance to take it away.